This week, Blue Origin resumed their space tourist flights on their new Shepard rocket after a nearly 2-year hiatus. So today we're talking to someone who's got their ticket.
Yes, we're joined by Dr. Eiman Jahangir, who has won a seat by entering MoonDAO's Ticket to Space giveaway. Dr. Jahangir is so much more than just a space tourist, however.
How are we doing? Let us know via our social media pages at Space and Things Podcast on Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, or via the contact form on our website, or by leaving a review on your podcast platform.
And please consider joining us on patreon.com/Space and Things. But right now, it's time for episode 195 of the Space and Things podcast.
Oh my God. Unbelievable, but it is right this time.
You're listening to the Space and Things podcast with Emily Carney and Dave Giles.
I'm Emily Carney.
And I'm Dave Giles, and welcome to episode 195 of our podcast. How you doing, Emily?
I'm doing great. A busy week, but a good week, as you already know. So really good. So how are you doing, Dave?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. This is, although obviously these don't only come out week by week. This is our third interview today that we've now done in the last 12 hours. So we are very busy here at Space and Things headquarters.
Yes, but in a good way.
Yeah, in a really good way.
It's
in a really
positive.
good way. Absolutely,
it's positive.
Is. Yeah. We're having a great time. I feel like Emily and I are spending more time through computer screens together right now than we ever have.
Yeah, we know each other pretty well around now, as far as being
2D
co-hosts
characters
and stuff like that. Yeah. It's funny.
Anyway, let's crack on with this week's main feature. In early 2024, MoonDAO held the Ticket to Space giveaway, which aimed to randomly select one lucky everyday person to go to space. There were more than 2,200 entries from all around the world, with Eiman Jahangir ultimately winning a seat aboard a future Blue Origin New Shepard launch. This will be the second time that MoonDAO has sent someone to space, the first being Kobe Cotton, who was chosen by a community vote and flew aboard Blue Origin's NS-22 flight in August 2022.
Dr. Eiman Jahangir was born in Tehran, Iran, and moved to Nashville, Tennessee at age 4. His childhood fascination with space led him to pursue a career in medicine and space exploration. He attended Martin Luther King Jr. Magnet High School, known for its focus on math and engineering, before earning a Bachelor of Arts at George Washington University and a medical doctorate from the University of Tennessee. He completed his medical training at Boston University Medical Center and Vanderbilt University, specializing in cardiovascular medicine. Eiman has pursued his interest in human spaceflight for over 15 years, including 2 finalist interviews for NASA's astronaut candidate program, which is pretty amazing in itself, and has dreamed about going to space. He has received training in various aspects of space exploration and served as the medical officer for the Inclusion 1 mission at Biosphere 2's Space Analog for the Moon and Mars, SAM. That's the acronym. Eiman has been an active member of MoonDAO since the beginning, so let's speak to a future space traveler.
Past to present, Sputnik to Starship, this is Space and Things.
We want to begin with a scene-setting question on Space and Things. So what started your fascination with space during childhood?
Yeah, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, which is just 2 hours from the Huntsville Marshall Space Center, Space and Rocket Center. And we were an immigrant family, so it was always just kind of activities we were kind of just watching our budget, right? But the Marshall Space and Rocket Center down in Huntsville gave us a good opportunity to kind of go on family outings. And so we'd frequent it a few times every summer. We'd go down, we'd check out the rockets. That was during the shuttle era. And I mean, things were really hopping down there. I don't know if you guys remember, there was a movie that came out called Space Camp.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And so obviously I saw that, and along with my experience of just going to the Space Center pretty frequently and seeing all the shuttle launches, I was just infatuated by space travel and the fact that humans were doing this. It made sense to me. It was like, we've always explored as humans, and initially that was on land, then by sea. And so now it's, into space. And I think that it was just, in my mind, the natural progression of human history.
Awesome. So, like many astronauts, your resume is pretty momentous. I looked over it before doing the question. So, you're a doctor who has completed much research during your career, specifically in cardiovascular medicine. Now, is there an overlap between your medical training and the astronaut training you've received?
Well, I would say that the overlap is really like anything else that requires a lot of effort. It's having the ability to focus on something for a very, very long time. Medicine, for instance, is a very daunting task. And when you start on that journey of like, okay, I'm going to take the pre-med courses, the idea that one day this is going to be easy to you is, I think it's quite foreign. But if you stick with it day to day through the hard times and the easy times, and you build upon that base of knowledge, by the time you're where I am, and now I've been practicing, outside of training for 12, 13 years, a lot of it does become easy. And that's what you hope for, right? You hope when you go to your doctor that they understand the basic physiology, they understand the pathology, and that when they're seeing you in clinic, it's not like a perplexing problem that they've done it a million times. And I think space travel and the training that NASA at least provides for their astronauts is similar, right? They go through very rigorous processes. They start with the basics and they get more and more complicated. And by the time someone's flown to space with NASA, they've practiced everything that they may do, emergencies, routine things like spacewalks, repairing the space station, or, when they did that Hubble mission, understanding the ins and outs. And I would say it's the same mentality to get there. Now, specifically, is there one thing in cardiology that prepares you to be an astronaut? I don't necessarily think so. I think, anyone who has that kind of persistence could do it. So engineers do it. Obviously, people in the military do it when they do their training. And I think one of the things that NASA does not provide that hopefully commercial space industry is going to provide is for people who haven't necessarily had careers that we know are as rigorous to get there. But you and I both know that to be an artist, like I'm not an artist, but to be a talented artist takes years of practice and dedication. So those people also have that ability, but just not in the way that we measure for things like NASA. So hopefully those individuals will get their opportunity to fly up as commercial space opens up.
So you were twice a finalist, according to your biography, for the astronaut candidate position at NASA. From what I understand, I mean, it's pretty amazing just to even make it to be a finalist. So how does one make it that far into selection? And, conversely, were you more motivated to make it to space after getting that close?
Absolutely. I mean, my kind of journey into space or human space flight as an adult happened near the end of medical school. My family and I went down to Kennedy Space Center, and, I'd always wanted to be an astronaut as a kid, but it's not super realistic. At least you don't think it is. So I pursued medicine. And then as I was finishing medical school, we went down to Kennedy. I was like, I wonder what the qualifications are. Like, I'm an adult now. I've done my medical training. I'm achieving that. And I went home, and lo and behold, it was the same thing. So I qualified at that point to apply to be an astronaut. And so I did. When the first round of applications came up in 2008, it was on a whim. I was like, I'm probably not going to get a call, but doesn't hurt. The one thing I've learned in life is never count yourself out. Don't be the person that says no to yourself. You should always put your best foot out there, foot forward, and see what happens. So I applied thinking, okay, I'll do this one time and then I'll get it out of my system. But lo and behold, I got called to be, initially for the highly qualified applicants, which is they take about 120 people down from all the applicants. And that was awesome. Wow. I mean, that was like 3 days at space camp, in Houston, on site, meeting astronauts, being interviewed by astronauts, getting to do certain kind of physical and mental task, activities. So it was pretty incredible. And I was like, well, that was cool. I was like, well, maybe they'll call me back. And I waited and never got a call back. But then I was much later, I thought they were done kind of picking people. I got a call back to come back as a finalist. So we were the last week of candidates that came back as a finalist. And that was even more incredible because then you're there for a week. And so that really got me motivated because I said, okay, well, not only am I qualified, but like someone at NASA thinks I'm qualified enough to get me to this point.
Yeah.
Obviously, back in 2008, 2009, NASA was the only game in town, unless you had, 30 to $60 million to pay the cosmonauts, the Russian space agency, to send you up as a private astronaut. So that's what I focused on. And I kind of continued to grow my skills and applied again in 2013. And once again, made it as a finalist. So that was incredible. Unfortunately, I didn't get picked. I think that once they get to the 120 person level, but specifically if you get down to the 60 finalists, everyone's well qualified. It's just, I don't know how they choose out of that like highly qualified group who gets picked or who doesn't, because at that point, they're all so extremely well qualified. And they don't give you any idea. So I don't know why I wasn't picked. I have my guesses, but I don't know for sure.
It's almost like they may be picking out of a hat or something like that. Everyone by that point, if you've made it that far, there's not much between you, is there?
Everybody's resume is probably awesome at that point,
I mean, incredible. And I think there is probably a few things. I think, so if you look at the doctors they've picked over the last 4 cycles, because since then there have been 4 selection groups, right? 09, 13, I think it was like 19, and then most recent one last year. All of the MDs or the DOs, the physicians that were picked, were former military. And I don't have that. I'm not a veteran. And it makes sense to me, right? If you have 8 physicians to pick from, and one of them has been trained in the military, well, they're coming in with a set of skills that the other people may or may not have. So I suspect that that's part of it. We'll see what happens with this current, process, because they're actively right now seeking astronauts. I have submitted my name again every single round. So this is my 5th round of applying. After the first 2 rounds, I didn't get a call back. I don't know if it's an age thing or otherwise, or if I was medically disqualified and didn't hear, but that's part of it. The other thing is, I think when they're picking people, it comes down to personality and deciding, can I live with this person for 6 months in the space station, right? Because that's what you're signing up for. You're signing up for this person to be your roommate in tight quarters for 6 months.
There's no way I'd get picked. There is no way anyone spend any time with me. I'm getting picked. That's it.
I was in the Navy and I had to do a deployment, and that was good. I hate saying this. That was good enough for me. I'm like, yep, 6 months with other people. Yeah, I'm good. I don't need that again.
I mean, the Navy is a good example, particularly those the people in the submarine. That's tight quarters.
I wasn't on a sub, but it's with your best friends for 6 months. So, all right.
So motivated after that for sure. I mean, I 2021, the doors opened up because I realized commercial space flight was becoming a thing. My friend who was also a finalist with me, Dr. Sian Proctor, flew on Inspiration 4. I was like, okay, yeah, this is happening. And then Blue Origin flew, Virgin Galactic flew. So the doors were opening, seemingly.
Absolutely. All right. MoonDAO is called the Internet Space Program, but its website quickly points to its seriousness. For example, it's contributed much to space research and development, and is also dedicated to diversity in spaceflight. So how did you become in MoonDAO, and why do you think you were selected as, an astronaut candidate to be on a future Blue Origin mission?
Yeah, so MoonDAO came up with this idea. A couple of people were sitting around in 2021 and they wanted to democratize space. So they said, I wonder if we can crowdfund sending someone to space. And that was where the idea came from. And they put a call out, and lo and behold, in 28 days, I think they raised at that time something like $8 million worth of Ethereum. A lot of money. People just sent them. And their initial mission was just to send people to space. So they sent Jude Perfect, was their first person, and then now I'm going to be the second. But when they received, I think, that kind of mandate and that much money, they started thinking more clearly about, well, what can we do to better both this Earth and space research and space flight? And so they are very serious. They've funded some research so far. Anyone, even if you're not a voting member of MoonDAO, anyone can submit a proposal that then gets voted on. So if you had a good idea for some sort of space idea, like right now they're working on a time standardization or like a time clock, someone came up with an idea, submitted it, we can vote to fund that proposal.
That's cool.
And help people out. So I really do suggest anyone, even if you're not into Web3 or crypto at one point, if you have a good idea, come find us, because we will help you. We will help support you if you have a good idea. I was selected, interestingly enough, through a raffle. So while I've done all of this effort, because my goal has always been into space, and kind of my initial game plan was continue to improve for NASA. And if NASA doesn't work out, improve for a commercial space company, right? There's a lot of companies that are growing right now. There are companies growing space, building space stations, or at least planning on putting them out into space. So my thought is that these companies will need physicians, either for actually being on site in space or in the development process. So that's what I've always been doing. But I also never close myself off to any opportunity. So any chance there's been to apply to get into space, I take. And MoonDAO just happened to be one of those. And honestly, I was lucky. I think it goes back to showing up, I put in my name in the hat and the name got drawn this time.
So are you taking any experiments with you on your future space flight? And if so, what do you intend to study?
Yeah, so it's a suborbital flight. So it's a pretty short flight. The whole round trip takes 15 minutes and you spend about 4 minutes in space. We're currently have been talking to people about what would make sense to do in such a short time. Some of the ideas that have been proposed are things like there's something called a hexoskin or an astroskin, which is a heart rate and respiratory rate and temperature monitor. And that was flown actually by Kelly Girardi in her Virgin Galactic flight. I think she was astronaut 21, if I'm correct. And then prior to her, it's been worn on the space station to kind of just see about monitoring. So that's one thing we're in discussions with. We've reached out to various people who do research to see if something makes sense. Now, at the end of the day, if we do find something, we need Blue Origin's permission. So we've also been talking to them to see if there's any research that they would want us to participate in or want me to participate in. The hope is we can do something, particularly as it attains to kind of collect some of that telemetry data, because I think, Blue Origin just sent a 90-year-old person to space, which is pretty incredible, Ed Dwight. And so if we can start collecting data on everyone that goes to space, which I don't know if they've done that yet, it does become helpful because you can see, okay, what happened to someone who's 90 when they go to space? What happens to their heart rate and their respiratory rate? Is there a way to measure their blood pressure and their blood oxygen level? Do we need to be concerned? Because the hope is one day we can send everyone to space, right? If you want to go to space, you can get a ticket just like if you want to go on an airplane flight. And we want to make sure that that's safe for people to go up and come back down.
So do you have any advice for perhaps, young people, high school, college, early college age, who are really itching to go to space in the future?
Yeah. So my biggest advice is to know that you can do more than one thing that you love. So, growing up, I was an immigrant and my father would have never said, go become an astronaut. That's not practical. It's not stable. It's not guaranteed. So he was a physician and he always said, you should consider being a doctor. And sure enough, that's what I did. So that takes a lot of dedication and you have to have truly a passion for it if you want to do that. If you want to become a physician, you have to set that vision early on, work hard in college, get into med school, work hard there, and then do residency, potentially fellowship. So that's a 15 plus year game plan. So you should always pursue one thing that you love that is not going to space, right? Like becoming an astronaut should be part of the plan, but it cannot be the main singular goal because as we've said, it's very difficult to do. Hopefully that'll improve, right? But to date, there have been less than 700 people in space. And as commercial space flight opens up, hopefully that number is going to grow and there'll be more jobs. I suspect there's going to be more jobs and more opportunities for people to go to space, but you can't bank on it, right? Because you might get medically disqualified. Just life happens. You never know. You might have a family and your family may not be supportive of it. Lots of things happen. So my first thing would be find a career that you love that is not space and pursue it. But in the meantime, always be thinking about space and be thinking about, as you're making decisions in your career, you can make them to where they might make you more attractive to NASA or other companies. So if you're going to become an engineer, figure out what kind of engineering would be useful. Obviously, there's aerospace and, kind of engineering, rocket manufacturing. If you're going to become a physician, we need all sorts of physicians, but if I had been dogmatic about it, I maybe would have done emergency medicine because a lot of physicians who are astronauts were emergency medicine physicians. Or maybe I would have gone and done an aerospace medicine fellowship and become a flight surgeon. So, but for me, becoming a cardiologist was more important because once again, even if you do those things, there's no guarantee. So I'd say it's good to find things that you love and you're passionate about and pursue them, but you should always bank on something that is also not space.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I'm sitting here thinking about the fact that you're going on a Blue Origin flight. And obviously, they've just had a 2-year hiatus while they were checking out some things that went wrong on an uncrewed mission. How does that work with you mentally when you get the call and it says, "Hey, you've got your flight," and this spacecraft recently has had to have 2 years off? Does that come into your head at all? Has it come into your head at all? What conversations do you have with yourself about that kind of thing?
Well, we know that there is some inherent danger and risk that comes with this, right? At the end of the day, you're sitting on top of a rocket. It doesn't matter if it's Blue Origin, if it's NASA, if it's Boeing, whoever is doing this. I mean, if you look at the safety record of Blue Origin right now, it's infinity, right? Because they've had zero issues with crewed flights. And I have no doubt that they are taking it seriously. I mean, you said it yourself. They took a 2-year hiatus not quite a 2-year hiatus, but approximately that, to look into what went wrong, and they figured it out. And even in that situation, the abort system appropriately functioned. I mean, you don't want to be aborted from a mission and fly off, because I think you hit something like 5 Gs, which is pretty high. But I mean, that's reassuring to me that, like, worst case scenario, the thing flies off and you land safely. So I honestly understand the inherent risk with all of this, but I also understand that Blue Origin as a company takes safety very seriously, particularly with crewed flights, as do all these companies, I would think. Things I've done in preparation, or things that I've done in preparation throughout my whole life. I went skydiving for the first time maybe a year ago with another person who was a astronaut candidate finalist and a friend. And I don't like heights and I never wanted to go skydiving, but he was like, "Let's go." So I asked my wife, "Do you care?" She's like, "No, I'll go skydiving." She's like, "It's probably more dangerous driving the 2 hours to the skydiving site than jumping out of the plane."
Yeah.
And statistically, that's true. I mean, there's inherent risk of jumping out of a plane that's flying perfectly well. But, I feel like the same thing. So I have double checked my insurance policies to make sure that space is covered. And I did that because one of my mentors I had lunch with previously, another cardiologist who was an astronaut, he was a payload specialist with NASA in the 90s, said right before he flew, he looked, and there was a space clause, and it said, if something happens in space. And at that time, I think he lived in Houston. He was an Air Force pilot. I think that there must have been something else, but my insurance agent told me, "Listen, this is a non-existent clause. You're fine. Like, no one's not going to pay out." But, so I'm not worried. I think that it's going to be perfectly safe, but you always, like anything else in life, should plan so that if something happens, your loved ones are protected.
Absolutely. I love that. The space clause. I'm going to speak to my dad about that. He works in insurance. Dad, have I got a space clause in my insurance? Just in case. Just in case. I love that.
You never know.
You never know. Exactly. I was recently listening to an interview with an astronaut who said that there's a difference between having a dream and having a wish. If it's a dream, it's something you're working towards every day, or at least every week. You're doing an activity that's getting you there. If you're not doing anything, it's just a wish. So, and I feel like your story has encapsulated that quote. All the time I've been listening to you talk, I've been thinking about that quote and how you're constantly working towards the idea of it, even if you're not necessarily 100% focused on it at that moment. It's still a step in that direction. And I guess you can focus that on so many other parts of life, right? That's such a not just going to space. It's an idea you can put into practice in so many other ways. So thank you for spending some time talking about it, because it's really helped just like focus everything that I've been listening to this week all on. It's that whole complete package.
Well, I love that. Yeah, I love that statement. That's a beautiful statement.
Alan Bean. There you go. the wise Alan Bean.
Before I got picked out, I had come to terms that maybe this was a hardcore hobby at this point, because, there are people who have hobbies that they are fully engrossed in. People who collect like World War II helmets, and they'll go to events and they'll spend their money and their rooms will be full of World War II stuff. Well, for me, it'd become space and human space flight. It's like, how can I improve this? How can I meet people who are equally minded? And it's shocking how big the community is. You meet all these people through all these different organizations that have the same dream from all walks of life, right? And my money and my time was going to space stuff, right? Like, I'm going to do an analog astronaut mission. That took 2 weeks away from work, my family. I'm going to go to a conference on space medicine, or I'm going to go to this conference. I'm going to try to go to a launch. I mean, so it is interesting because you're absolutely right. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger puts it as vision, right? You have to have a vision, and the vision can be huge, but you just have to take small steps. So whether that vision is to be a bodybuilder and you say, okay, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do these reps, that is progress. It might not seem like it, but it's definitely progress. And that goes back to what you had just said about dreams and wishes.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you all the best. Thank you for spending some time with us today to tell us more about it. We wish you all the best. Any idea when the flight might be yet, or is it still undecided?
It is to be determined. So Blue Origin will announce it. I'm hopeful that they will announce the next crew now that, you know, they just had a flight recently with Ed Dwight here in May. So I'm hoping that they'll announce who the next crew is. And then that'll get us one step closer. Every flight gets me one flight closer. So I'm pretty excited.
Amazing. Well, we'll keep our eyes peeled to the space news for your name coming out of in the announcements. I can't wait to watch your flight now.
I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards too and tell you what it was like.
Awesome.
That would be amazing. Yeah. That'd be perfect.
That would be great. We'd love it.
Bringing you a new episode every Thursday since September 2020. This is Space and Things.
Okay, so what's interesting is this competition by MoonDAO, or a raffle essentially, was aimed to select one everyday person to go to space. Right? So the plan was to get someone like you or I to go, right? But no, instead, the person who wins is extremely qualified. Basically, should have been selected as an NASA astronaut by now. Has got very close to being a NASA astronaut a couple of times.
Yeah.
Isn't that just wonderful that actually someone who has really put themselves out there wins that prize?
I'm glad it's him because I think he's incredibly qualified. There's not many astronauts from Iran or who were born in Iran. I can think of maybe two off the top of my head. If I think there were two women ones who are with NASA. No, one's with NASA and one was a commercial astronaut. If I'm not mistaken, if I am mistaken, somebody please contact me or contact us and let us know about it. But I think it's cool that we're going to have that kind of representation in space. And not only that, but I think as a cardiovascular doctor, I'm not a doctor. I have no medical background whatsoever, but I am interested in obviously what the human body does in space. It'll be nice to have a lot of data on that. And I think, it's good to have somebody like him experimenting with that. I like the idea of what he said. We've sent Ed Dwight in the last week. Ed Dwight, I don't want to say Ed White because Ed White is a different person because I said Ed Dwight earlier this week. I forgot to somebody and they were like, the guy who passed, like, no, not that guy. I'm talking about Ed Dwight, the sculptor.
You have to say two different D's. Ed Dwight.
Correct. The sculptor and the gentleman who really was supposed to be the first black astronaut, the first astronaut of color. But he's the eldest person to fly in space. And, he's 90. And it is interesting to see what kind of data they can get from that because, as Eiman pointed out, space is increasingly becoming more democratized. You're seeing people flying to space that probably wouldn't have flown in space 40 years ago. It'd be nice to see some medical data, even though if it's not a lot. These suborbital flights are not that long, but still, it would be neat to see how they do react during ascent, re-entry, key events like that, where somebody's probably under a little bit more stress than they would normally be, because you're probably, panicking. I wouldn't say panicking. I doubt any of those people were panicking, honestly, because they knew what they were getting into. I'm speaking from my personal experience. When you get on a roller coaster, you're like, what did I do? I would be panicking maybe, but seriously, it would be it's useful to get that kind of data. And I think somebody like Eiman, who is a medical, who is a doctor, who is interested in that type of data, is an ideal person to fly on one of these flights. And I'm excited. I can't wait to see him go up there. And I hope we can get to talk to him after he goes up to see what it was like. Because as he said, there have been less than 700 people who've flown in space. I think he'll be the third person who was born in Iran to go to space. I mean, that's a big deal. There's not many, so it'd be interesting to see his perspective on it.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because for all the talk of space opening up, it's still such a low percentage of people who have actually been, isn't it? I mean,
there's still less than 100 women who've ever been to space.
It's crazy. I really enjoyed that interview. I found it really inspiring. Yes. MoonDAO is an interesting idea and an interesting community, and they're doing some good stuff. It does evolve around cryptocurrency, so some people might not like it purely on that basis. But at the end of the day, it's a community of people who are trying to get things done in space and enabling things to happen in space, and they're trying to plan to get a lunar base made and loads of other crazy things. And it's all about community and democratize. It's kind of what you and I have spoke about so many times over the last, fairly recently as well, about who's making the decisions on what's happening and so on and so forth. And here's an organization which is basically saying, come be part of that decision-making process within our organization. I like that. I don't know enough about crypto to really get involved, but I'm sure there's plenty of our listeners who do know about it and may want to go and check it out. So as always, if you want to know more about MoonDAO or Dr. Eiman, head over to our show notes, which you can find by clicking the link in the description of this podcast on your podcast provider, or by going to spaceandthingspodcast.com and go and have a look, because their website, the MoonDAO website, is really interesting. There's some cool videos. There's a lot of information on there. And for me personally, if it wasn't for the fact it was crypto, I'd be signing up and getting involved. I'm just not in that world of crypto currently, and I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm just a bit of a dinosaur in that regard, Emily. I'm sorry to say.
I'm a bit of a dinosaur too. I honestly don't. Never mind. This is totally off topic. I was thinking this week of like VHS tapes and stuff, and how you kept everything on VHS back in the day, and I'm like, dang it, I am old. So I honestly don't know enough about crypto to make a statement either way, because I'm just old. I don't know. I don't even know really what it is. So, but I think the website is really awesome, and I love how it focuses on, as we've said a million times during this episode, democratizing space, opening it to, more regular people who would love to have a chance at that, and I think that's awesome. And that's really what it's all about, I think, in the end. Because Eiman is somebody who has dreamed of space. He's really tried to get to it and almost made it. I mean, to make it as a NASA astronaut finalist, that's like, you're already in the 1%. That's incredible. That means you are super qualified. Yeah. I mean, you are exactly like, you are in the less than 1% of people in the world who can do that. And the fact that he made it that close is still pretty. I mean, that's something to brag about. That's really is.
Absolutely. Also, there wasn't a hint of arrogance in the fact he didn't make it. It was very much a case of, I had a great experience in the application process, going through it. That was really cool. I had a great time, and I like that. I like hearing that. It wasn't like all doom and gloom. It was a big learning experience.
Screw NASA.
Still applying. Exactly. My other comment about MoonDAO, which I quite like, is that I think they're called tokens. So their crypto token, or their currency name, is Mooney.
That's funny. That's funny.
You can buy some Moonies. I think that's amazing. I think that's very funny.
That's cute. That's cute.
Yeah, absolutely. So as always, as I said, check the show notes for more information. And if you're one of our Patreon subscribers, you can watch the full interview with Dr. Eiman. Just head over to patreon.com/space and things.
Dave will put a link to that in the show notes.
So, Emily, what's caught your eye this week in spaceflight?
The Starliner flight, which was supposed to go in probably May 25th, has been delayed again. There are helium leak issues with the spacecraft propulsion systems. And right now, the flight is delayed indefinitely. So I shared a link with Dave. We'll put it in the show notes. It's from spacenews.com if you want to read more about it. But for now, the flight is delayed indefinitely. So if you were thinking of coming to the Space Coast to come see it, I hope you had refundable travel and you can maybe put your travel plans on hold for a little while, as one does. I had to do that for Artemis, and I get it. These things happen, and I'm not passing judgment. I'm glad they're spending time to get these things right versus just sending it out, especially that there are going to be 2 people on board the spacecraft. And the next piece of news is that Starship is nearing its next test flight.
Whoa.
I want to make it very clear that there will be no people aboard this one. This test flight will have nobody aboard it. So in case anything happens to it, nobody will be affected by it. Nobody inside, at least, will be affected by it. But Elon Musk has said, and this was a couple days ago, he said Starship Flight 4 in about 2 weeks. So, and he's also said primary goal is getting through max re-entry heating. Because as you remember, the last Starship test flight that happened in March, they pretty much nearly completed everything. I don't know if it didn't go all by the book or the way it should have, but they almost made it through re-entry. We got some pretty amazing shots of the plasma going over the spacecraft as it came in, which was just mind-blowing. So hopefully in roughly 2 weeks or so, probably when Dave comes back, we'll have that to talk about. I'm hoping to go out there and see one of those someday. Because, I'm sorry, the footage looks just incredible. It's the largest rocket in the world. It's just, I got to see it someday with my eyeballs. That would be awesome. So that's all I got this week. So Dave, what has caught your eye this week?
Well, I think we need to talk about Ed Dwight. I know we've mentioned it briefly, but I think we need to talk about this. We mentioned it right at the top of the show. Blue Origin are back in business with the New Shepard in terms of their crewed spacecraft. They had their 7th launch of a crew doing one of their suborbital flights, the first for nearly 2 years. And they were on a roll at that point. They were doing quite a few in quick succession. So it's good to see that they're back. And Ed Dwight was one of the 6 people that were on that mission over the weekend. And he becomes the oldest, as Emily said, he becomes the oldest person in space, beating William Shatner by a month, who also flew on a previous Blue Origin flight at 90 years old, which is crazy. So Ed Dwight, the reason we're excited about this is back in 1961, President Kennedy selected Dwight to train at the U.S. Air Force's Aerospace Research Pilot School, which is called ARPS. And it was rightly considered to be a route through to the astronaut corps at the time. So essentially, picking Dwight made him the first black astronaut candidate. But he never went beyond candidate status, even though he completed all the correct training. The Air Force even recommended him for astronaut status, but NASA didn't choose him for whatever reason.
There's a lot more there that I'm not going to get into because, frankly, it makes me angry.
There was a recent documentary, wasn't there, which we should probably get people to watch.
Yeah. I think it was called The Space Race, and it's on Nat Geo.
Right, okay. I haven't seen it yet, but I remember you talking about it and saying it was it made you very angry.
Woo! Yeah, you will get angry watching it because it's a lot of, you'll get hot because a lot of, it was just racism of the time and just stupidity. Basically he got to ARPS and a lot of the astronauts like Frank Borman, Jim McDivitt, blah, 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 those kind of guys came from ARPS and became astronauts, afterwards. And basically he was in that pipeline. I'm not going to mention no names, but there were certain historical figures who really just were not with were just racist. I'll just be blunt. They had a racist side to them and they just really worked against him. They didn't want him there, just because of what he represented. They downplayed his skills, things like just stuff like that, basically saying this person sucks, but it was more to sort of exclude him. So, it'll make you, I'm getting so mad I'm starting to stutter, so I'll stop.
Yeah, well, go and check out that documentary if you're interested in finding out more about that. So here's the quote from Dwight after his flight. He said, "I thought I didn't need this in my life, but I lied. I really did need it."
Yes!
That's what he said shortly after landing. And I think that's wonderful that he's had that experience and finally got to go, albeit only for 4 minutes. But it's great that he's... Blue Origin have done this a few times now where they're correcting some wrongs from the past. And although it's just, with Wally Funk, we've seen that as well. Although it's a little bit too late in so many ways, it's never going to really do everything it needs. It's never going to be enough. That's exactly right. It's never going to be enough.
There are certain things that I don't know if it would ever be enough. Even if they sent...
it's not good enough reparation, is it? But at least it's a nod to acknowledging something went wrong here. Yeah,
we're going to try to right a wrong.
Yeah, Ed Dwight's seat was funded by Space for Humanity, which is an organization who I think we need to get someone on from. We've actually spoken to 2 members. Yeah, we've spoken to 2 members of the board already on the podcast, but we didn't speak about Space for Humanity. We had both Dylan Thomas and Sarah Kudas, who are both in the directors of Space for Humanity, and Dylan has obviously travelled to space since then as well. So I think this is something we really need to spend a bit more time. Space for Humanity, much like MoonDAO, obviously just trying to make space for everyone, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think definitely with Ed Dwight's addition to the canon of spaceflight as an astronaut, I definitely think this is obviously number one. It's, as you said, it's righted a historical wrong, and or it's attempted to right a historical wrong. It has further democratized space because Dwight, back in the day, he was a pilot, he was a military guy, right? But for much of his life, he's been a sculptor, he's been an artist. He's not just somebody who fits into that military niche, so not only did they send, somebody who, is a aerospace pioneer, they also sent somebody who is an artist, is somebody who could, is a sculptor, someone who has that side to them as well. So I think that is also special, as well as you have that represented. We need more artists in space. We need more, why can't Dave Giles or why can't somebody who's a musician go to space or something like that? Why can't an artist or a writer go to space? I mean, we've had a few astronauts who are great writers who have been to space, but I'm talking about a dedicated somebody that's like I'm not nominating myself.
I'm nominating myself.
I'm not saying it should be me.
I'm saying it should be me.
Wink, 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 wink. I'm not saying it should be me. I mean, not me at all. I would not appreciate a trip to space whatsoever. But no, I'm kidding. But it does. I think it's cool that they did add that. They did send an artist to space as well. Who happens to be an aerospace pioneer. So that's really awesome.
Agreed. Well, as always, check the show notes again. I've mentioned it again for links to articles to do with those subjects.
To find out what guests are coming up in the future and submit your questions, head over to patreon.com/Space and Things.
Okay, thanks for joining us this week. I'm away next week because I'm doing a mini tour trying to revive my music career so I can use it to apply to go to space. Anyway, we've still got podcast plans. Awesome. Thank you, as always, to those who have financially contributed to this podcast in any way, whether that's buying merchandise or making a one-off donation on our website, spaceandthingspodcast.com, or by signing up to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Space and Things. It really has helped us be able to make 195 episodes of this podcast, and it's the only way we can currently keep this going. We don't have a big company behind us or any corporate sponsors, so it's just from the support of individuals that gives us the backing to be able to do this every single week.
It's quite something that we haven't missed a week in nearly 4 years. How long have you been listening to us for? Let us know via our social media pages or leave a review on your podcast platform. But don't forget, in space, no one can hear you mean.
You've been listening to the Space and Things podcast.